What makes a home feel like a home? What gives a place that feeling of grace and serenity that puts you at ease? To some, it's a cool light study with shelves full of stories and knowledge. To others, it's a warm living room filled with guests and conversations. Some might find home outdoors, listening to nature telling us its stories through bird songs and rustling branches. Now you're probably asking yourself, what does this have to do with Magic the Gathering? Well, as I was looking through all of the artworks of the 2019 Ravnica sets, specifically the lands, I noticed that the plane isn't really homely. The burning fires and skewered performers are good for Rakdos audiences, but not so much for its residents. The lack of order in the Gruul wilderness will push out even the most nature-loving people. None of the guilds show you any sense of serenity or stability. Would you really want to live in the Golgari undergrowth? I don't think so. The only exception to this is the Selesnya Conclave. Almost every single artwork I saw depicting this guild and its architecture radiated either a sense of home or that of a comforting community. Now normally, in these art analysis videos, I tend to look at each individual card of a guild in order to display specific examples of a technique or composition to form their individual meanings. But in this case, I will look at the Conclave's artworks more as pieces of a larger panorama of themes and hospitality. The first thing I would like to focus on is the overall color palette all these pieces share. It's an earthy tone made up of greens, browns, greys, silvers, and the occasional yellows. These colors alternate dominance from piece to piece as if to create a calming visual rhythm. Selesnya Guildgate is the zenith of the rhythm with a rich, warm mixture of yellows and greens that cover and hold the smaller citizens in the lower steps. The trees blend onto one another and appear in a calm harmony with the buildings. Rays of light shine into the highlight of the guild symbol that looks over everyone, and its symmetrical nature shows the strength and stability. The people are also represented by a variety of colors, not simply the green or white that is commonly associated with Selesnya members. This implies that everyone is welcome here and not just people from within the guild. This light gets pulled back into the background of sprouting renewal by the strong green ambience. This piece also shows how unified the Selesnya is by depicting the entire cycle of life with the same green hue. We start at life with the woman on the right. The sparkle from her hand leads us into the grand statue/corpse of a giant beast representing death. Here lie the darkest greens of the piece, signifying just the ending of life. From here, the shining of life gives birth into the plants growing upwards towards the light. As we wind down the peak of light, we go on to Sumala Woodshaper. Here, the light diminishes more into the background and the browns and grays come in. The cooler colors come in from the bottom and surround the warm center of orange. This contrast does focus on the woman's face as well as the elemental in the background. We will come back to the elemental in the background later, but for now, the open stance the woman gives is a welcoming one and her magic looks uniform and controlled. This is very different from how magic is displayed in the Izzet League, where it's very sporadic and random, and also very different from how it's displayed in the Azorius Senate, where the magic is visually focused to constrict and control other people. Now, as we head into the bottom part of the rhythm, we enter pause for reflection. The light here is still present, but it's more relaxed, it's calming, it's similar to an exhale of breath. It's one of my favorite pieces of the guild, to be honest with you. And its effect to prevent all damage reflects this feeling too. It's safe even at the lowest point of light. While dominated by grays and orange, there is still green present in the light, and white in the sky and a soldier's armor. As we go upwards after the bottom of the rhythm, we enter Dawn of Hope to continue the cycle. After a moment of rest and reflection, the light returns brightly in the background. In a set that depicts various battles, death, victories, and bloodshed, it's very rare to find one, let alone two moments of calm, peace, and serenity, both of which in this case belong to the Selesnya Conclave. The greens here start to come back in vibrancy from the gardens in the midground to the clothes and leaves in the foreground. You will note the buildings in the background, how nature and architecture blend into one as you look up into the tree. As your eyes go upwards and you discover every little arch and walkway in the tree in the background, they don't really seem to try to overpower each other. If you were to be a citizen of this land, you would walk through these walkways and you wouldn't really notice that the architecture isn't part of nature. They would just both seem one and the same from how unified this guild manages to make them look. Finally, in Conclave Guildmate, the shining light explodes once again to overwhelm the greys and dark greens. Behind him, once again, we are showing the buildings growing alongside the foliage within them. And it's here that the rhythm continues back and loops around into the peak of yellows and bright oranges. The Conclave's art uses its main small color palette to display a wide range of welcoming auras. From just these, we find comforting cool colors, vibrant whites, bustling company, and solitary reflection. This range in rhythm allows the guild to be appealing to a wide variety of people. Now, while the color palette rhythm shown through all these pieces does do a good job of making the Selesnya Conclave seem homely, welcoming, and comforting, it is nowhere near the only way that it does so. Next, we're going to look at its architecture and how that displays a sense of unity and bonding. If you look at the second guild gate, it shows leaves and vines climbing up the walls of the gate, but they don't overgrow the walls. The plants themselves respect the limits of the architecture. This is a running theme that will go on throughout most of the pieces we'll look at after this. Now, a common motif that is present through most artworks is that light usually represents purity, divinity, or just righteousness and goodness. If something is well lit, it's probably good and reinforcing. Here, the outside of the guild gate is shown as dark, brooding, the greens are all muddy, the yellows and the reds kind of blend together into a brownish mess. But if you look inside the guild, the colors shine independently. They shine brighter and they look more beautiful. You can see a red bush is vibrantly red, you see the yellows, the oranges, the greens, all uniformly placed around, and a path leading you inwards into the light. It invites you in, it makes you feel like the guild gate is a nice home to be in. Now we're going to loop back around to the elemental I pointed out in Tumala Woodchaper. This and the other Selesnya elementals are created to raise their armies and protect their people. But even when creating them, they also still focus on making them blend in and seem secure. The armor is very similar to the architecture nearby, so that if you were to look at one of these elementals standing in the middle of town, there is a possibility you won't really see them. They'll just blend into the background and won't seem aggressive. It gives you a sense of security and uniformity. If you're a member of the guild, you're safe from them, you won't even see them. But also, I would like to point out how this specific elemental's, his mask, it looks a lot like a knight's helmet. And why is that? These elementals don't really have eyes or faces, aside from one or two of them. They don't need them, they are elemental creatures fueled by magic. So why put these window-like pieces of architecture in front of its, well, so-called face? It's because it reminds you of knights. It reminds you of these holy knights that serve and protect you. By putting this mask onto the elemental, it gives you a sense of familiarity. When you look at it, you don't see this bustling monster, you see a giant regal knight of nature. That also makes you feel safe, because it seems like they're protecting your town and your people. In Crushing Canopy, this architectural aesthetic is seen more prominently. If you look at this specific elemental, its wrists have windows that you would see in a typical building, and its left shoulder has a railing as if somebody was intended to walk by there. The Dimir Spybug here stands out very starkly with its blue skin tone, its black eyes, and its purple wings. Now, well, yes, that's obvious because it's just a different color scheme from a different guild. It also just goes to show how unified the Selesnya Conclave is, where even the smallest speck of another color just breaks the whole thing and makes you feel like something's wrong. Now we move on to Worlds of Colossus, where we take the Selesnya elementals and take them out of their hometown. Once they're placed out here, you can see how much they were designed to fit in the Selesnya territories. Now that they're no longer there, they look different, they look wrong, they don't fit in at all. And it's because these elementals were supposed to fit in at home, but they're supposed to remind you of home. They're supposed to remind you of the Selesnya territories and just how graceful it is. And grace is something very important to the Selesnya, which we'll take up on later. But here, this gigantic elemental, it doesn't really become destructive. It remains graceful and walks the streets just like anybody else would. We're going to look at the best example of the blending of the guild's spirituality, architecture, power, and grace. And this is in its gigantic kaiju of vegetation that is Vidugazi. Here, you can note the architectural is literally built into his body, and it still walks around, even its gigantic size, very gracefully, even in the iconic War of the Spark artwork where it knocks over Nicobal's statue. It's seen as a pillar of hope and magnificence. In the background of Venerated Loxodon, you can see the blend of nature very well. The buildings in the background have oranges and greens rising along from the shine of the soldiers in the foreground. The brush strokes blend together as if to say that the energy irradiating from these people are the same energy flows that go through the leaves and the buildings. They are all one and the same and connected. Here is where I want to pivot into the next piece of the Selesnya panorama. That is, its sense of unity and protection. While the militaristic goal of the Selesnya is to garrison the large army in Ravnica, that is not its main purpose. The Selesnya's motive for getting as many people into the guild as possible is that they genuinely believe it's what's best for each person and Ravnica as a whole. Now this is told through my favorite piece of artwork across the entire Ravnigan sets, and that's the card Camaraderie. Its flavor text, to start off, within the Song of Selesnya, One Becomes All, lies the true unifying purpose of the Selesnya Conclave. It wants everyone to connect with the spiritual nature and mana of the plane as one singular group with a singular focus. Its effect's potency grows with the size of your army, which is very much the Selesnya's whole thing. It at first grants all the members knowledge and health, and then ends with making them all stronger. It incentivizes you to go wide and to play as many creatures as possible. Well, that alone is a bunch of flavor just from the text box in this card. Now we can look onto the art itself. The interwoven architecture is present in the background, but it's faded in order to make the members the focal point. The members are then shown to be perfectly balanced from a compositional standpoint. Now, balance, as we've talked about in previous videos, is how the weight of a specific piece is shifted by the subjects within the piece. It's very rare to find a piece of art that is perfectly balanced in a way that isn't incredibly obvious and blunt. Here, we're going to look at each individual member and notice how they contribute to the overall balance of the piece. The weight of the Loxodon staff on the left is counterbalanced by the outward lean of the wolf on the right. The centaur on top pushes upwards with its staff and posture, while the soldier on the left pushes downward and to the left with the aim of its bow. By doing these, you have achieved both horizontal and vertical balance. In the center, the dryad stands perfectly centered and vertical, bringing the entire piece together, becoming the center of balance of the group. There is no single member left behind, nor does any one member hold any more important. Each one contributes to the overall balance of the piece equally. It doesn't just stop with balance. The theme of unity and protection and camaraderie is present even further than this. If we take a look at the dryad in the center, along her left leg is a series of vines that flow down and connect with the grass on the rock. You can't really tell which way it went. Did the grass start at the leg or did the grass start at the rock? But it doesn't matter, it's just showing a sign of connection. If you look at the bottom feet of the Loxodon and the dwarf on the left, you'll notice that as you go down the brushstrokes, it becomes impossible to distinguish which brushstrokes belong to the lower body of these two members and which brushstrokes belong to the rock, because it's meant to just unify them all equally. A similar effect is used in the headpiece for the centaur on the top right, where his helmet is the same color and same brushstrokes as the clouds behind them. Overall, everything in this piece unites to reinforce the sentiment of camaraderie, comfort, and unity in the guild. The Selesnya now appears to be a family that will welcome you, accept you, love you, and protect you, which is another usual note of what makes you feel at home. These bonds and strength through numbers are also shown through March of the Multitudes and Conclave Tribunal. In March of the Multitudes, the army of the Selesnya is shown ready to march on, all standing proud and secure, each with purpose. Even the elementals in the back show a sense of restraint and order, despite their humongous size. Note how the use of light points out how in the cool dark grays and blues, the source of light is not found along the elementals nor the mounted units, but the large infantry in the center, showing that the power of the Selesnya comes from its grand numbers, not its individual members. A green motif of swirling greens connects the druid's magic with the banners of the soldiers in the center. Moving on to Conclave Tribunal, here the people are all connected by their color schemes as well as their roots. The plant life below blends into the bodies just like it was in Camaraderie. You can't tell where the people end and the plants begin because they're all meant to be a singular unit. Their bond is also symbolically shown through the twisting and twirling of the vines in the bottom with each other. In Bounty of the Mighty, these themes of unity, protection, and the large standing army as well as the color schemes are completely twisted into a new perspective while still maintaining the overall message. Instead of facing the army, you are seen as a member. While the piece has a cooler tone, it's one of tranquility, not of fear or anger. You look up to see the more experienced members hold the line in upright and respectable postures. This piece allows you a glimpse into the eyes of a new recruit as they see comfort and reassurance and expertise before they see any power or aggression. This calm and collected mannerism is present in all of the main depictions of the Selesnya. These calm faces and powerful stances all help support the overall feelings of homeliness and security. The bonds of the Selesnya are plenty. We've seen how they bond with nature, how they bond as a unit, but they don't only care about the macro level interactions, they also care about the micro level interpersonal relationships on a one-on-one basis of the members of its guild. Once you look at joined shields, you see two soldiers who appear to contrast each other in various different ways. They have different ethnicities, ages, genders, and even attitudes, with one smiling and the other angry. Their shield color schemes contrast each other to display this. Yet despite these differences, they interlock both their shields and their hands to support the defenses of each other. They are shown defending a light source behind them, making their stance seem holy, defending against the darkness that's coming in. Tristani Discordant is a display of the ultimate bond possible. The three dryads became one with each other and the spirit of Mount Selesnya. What does the card itself do? It rallies all of your members and grants them power, regardless of their individual tribes, and its presence brings in new members to the guild. Finally, it brings all the creatures on the battlefield home at the end of every turn. In Ledev Guardian, we see a knight and her mount Wolf. Its flavor text tells the story of how far back these two actually go. I've raised her since I was a pup, and she's raised me since I was a recruit. Their bond is displayed by their similarities in stance and their gazes, as well as in their armor designs blending into one another. It also suggests that whenever we see a Selesnya and their mount in other artworks, they most likely have just as a rich history and strong bond as these two. The Selesnya see their mount as an extension of themselves. They are just as valuable as any other life on the battlefield. This sense of protection and bond is not limited to just the members either. While all of the guilds received a bonding card in War of the Spark, the Selesnya were given an extra one through Band Together. The final way that the guild shows a sense of homeliness, unity, and comfort is how they are willing to protect its members. Ledev Champion is captured in the middle of motion, yet is still presented as a calm and secure individual. The flags point to a smooth, even wind, and all of the soldiers are ready for battle. This tone has been present within all the art pieces that we've looked at beforehand. But now, if we look at Pack's favor, we can see a wolf that we've seen a dozen times gracefully, now looking ferocious and terrifying. Now that it's outside of its natural home, it's on a battlefield and willing to attack. This alien territory is shown by the color schemes that are very different from what is commonly found in Selesnya territories, these being the blue coats and the dark cool backgrounds. While the elementals that we've seen beforehand are massive, they are not even nearly the biggest threat that Selesnya have. Those are actually the great worms they have the ability to summon. These worms are gigantic, destructive, violent. They're really not like anything we've seen in the Selesnya. And they're not supposed to be. They're meant to be this looming threat that the Selesnya have under their belt, that if anybody comes even close to damaging their people, they're willing to use them. They're willing to break their usual stoic, graceful, restrained self if it means protecting their own people. In Flight of the Equinox, they're all seen charging aggressively, but they're all still singularly focused on a point. It isn't just a bunch of knights attacking, but a whole fleet together. Finally, I want to look at the Selesnya aggression towards agitators in the clearest way possible. In Tolsimir Frentawolves, its effect calls forth a fellow companion. It immediately attacks anyone in the way and revitalizes you by giving you health. After this, any more help that comes does the same. In the art we can see the outside aggressors shown as a blue sea of zombies, very different from the usual green, orange, and earthy tones of Selesnya. The only light present is the one being reflected from the wolf's fur and their armor. It's good to note how this is coming from the wolf, not from Tolsimir himself, even though he's the focus of this piece. It aims to show how the power that he has isn't from himself, but from everybody else that he brings in. This piece shows the ferocity the Selesnya have no problem displaying in order to protect their own people. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this look at the Selesnya Conclave's various artworks. Even though this is my 8th art analysis video, I will never not be amazed at how certain values and emotions can be so interwoven within a fictional faction that in almost any artistic depiction of them, those values shine through. The Selesnya have many bonds, to the planet they live on, to one another as a large group, and to their micro-scale interpersonal relationships. These bonds allow them to display a sense of serenity and grace that makes them truly feel homely and accepting. Now I ask you fellow viewers, what magic card amongst the tens of thousands that we have seen printed make you feel at home? I'm really curious as to what you all have to share. Now thanks again, and if you enjoyed the analysis, please like and subscribe. I know you're probably very sick of hearing that, but it genuinely does help me. Also, if you know anybody who has an appreciation for art who doesn't play Magic, send them my way. I'd honestly love to hear their views on these pieces from a complete outsider's perspective. Well, I'm Carlos the Ravnican Artist, and I'll see you around.